We were all born with the innate power of knowing and wisdom within us. The challenge for many of us is that we were taught to seek answers externally instead of searching from within. And this is the reason why so many of us find ourselves going around in circles, searching for new ways, but could never find the way. The womanly way. It's not the way. It's not my way. But it is a pathway to support all of us returning back to self, reconnect with our inner wisdom through loving ourselves, knowing ourselves, and reconnecting with ourselves.
Tell me and be honest. Tell me, should I've known?
So we can start to find our own way as modern day women. Are you interested? Well, sit back, relax, and welcome to this amazing journey.
Hello. Welcome to this episode of the Womanly Way podcast. I am your host, Lala Angela Wang, and today I've got a very special guest. Special not just because he's a special person, but he's also a very dear friend of mine, but also he's George's godfather. So I've known Nikhil, almost a decade. Would you believe, Nikhil?
I think it's over a decade, isn't it?
No, it's not over yet, but it feels like
Over yet.
I
know, ages, maybe a lifetime. Yeah.
7 or 8 years. We started to become, I guess, buddy entrepreneurs at a networking function, which Nikhil was actually presenting. And because we both love talking about business and anything spirituality so much, we become really good friends. And then when I started a mastermind, a very close-knit mastermind, Nikhil and Scott were both in the mastermind. And when we had George, we were like, oh, well, I guess he's a good enough fella to be George's godfather. Plus, he has got the secret thing. He always wanted to be a godfather. A godfather.
Godfather.
He's funny. And he is also a very clever writer, let's just put it this way. I do consult him with a lot of my copywriting skills, maybe spelling checks every now and then as well. As you all know, I'm not that great with spelling. But really, the reason I want to bring Nikhil on is because he's been through quite a journey in recent years. And a lot of people might be asking, well, hold on a second. He's not a female. I'm like, yeah, duh, I can tell. But part of what the woman... No, hey, I've got short hair too. You've got short hair. Who knows, right?
Hey, we could be twins.
But really, part of the womanly way isn't just all about womanhood and being a woman. Well, it is, but it's also about the wider impact that us as female in today's society can create. And to be honest, I often say to my colleagues, I'm old-fashioned. I'm really old-fashioned, believe it or not. Even though I've got short hair, I do radical things. I do, things that's outside of my comfort zone. But deep down, I think for me, a lot of my values are traditional values, and I truly believe as a woman, our roles aren't really about going out there and go, hey, I can take over the world and I don't need men, right? I think our role is, hey, I can take over the world because our ancestors, women, have been taking over the world for decades, just in different ways. And we can have traditional values whilst at the same time creating changes in our industry, in the world, whilst being mums, being partners, and being supportive. But the main role of women, past, present, and future, I do believe is to bring communities together. And I think, rightly or wrongly, there's a lot of reasons why our families are getting smaller. but that's also allowing us to be less connected with our community. And I do believe that's part of a reason why there are a lot of social issues in our society today. So it is my mission to bring back communities, maybe in a slightly different way, but to reunite communities, reunite the traditional family units, like a mum and a dad having, because I do believe male and female, we do have different influence and different roles to play in a family unit, and it is important. So I do want to, I guess, present Nikhil's story to you guys. One is to present a different perspective, because the womanly way is all about different perspectives. Two is to really talk about what is the impact on our next generation when we break up at least the basic fundamental family units. And then thirdly, it's really to look at a different side of the coin. It's not always about just the woman that's getting hurt. Your kids do get hurt too. We're going to talk about Nikhil's beautiful daughter as well. And guys do get hurt too, right? There's always a different side of story. There's always two sides to a coin. And really, it's not just because Nikhil's dear friend of mine. It's just because, hey, I've got a live example here where I partially lived through his experience and I feel it. Right, but there are plenty of examples similar to Nikhil's experience out there. So without further ado, I think, Nikhil, first of all, maybe do a bit of intro, who you are, what you do, and then feel just into, I guess, the story about how did it all started? How did this whole journey begin? Because, I've heard it, and I think when we first all heard it, it was like a bit of a shock to the system. So if we can start from where it begins, and then perhaps there's a little bit of backwards and forwards, we can talk about it in hindsight and talk about the journey and what you've been through and lessons learned as well. So take away.
For sure. So let me start with, my name is Nikhil, obviously, for those of you who don't know me. My background is in business as a copywriter. So I would write the words that bring people more leads, close more sales, and grow their revenues. And I evolved from that into a business growth specialist. So I've been helping people to grow their businesses effectively. That's what I've been doing. And it's been a good journey. I've been in business in some form or another since about 2007. And, I've been running an agency right now up until now, from 2013 to now. I've been running a copywriting agency that specializes in helping people in the space of transformation. So if you're a coach, if you're a healer, if you're a consultant or a trainer, basically impacting people's lives and their businesses in some way, then I'm the guy to help you to get those more clients. People come to me when they want to make more money through written word. That's what I did. By night, what do I do? By night, look, I'm a dad. I'm a very, very proud dad of my daughter. I do have one daughter only at the moment. I am also a Taekwondo teacher. That's been a really, really cool part of my journey. And my daughter and I started that journey together. And also my dad joined in on that one too. And now I'm a teacher 7 years later. And, amongst many, many other things, I'm a very deeply inquisitive person. I have always been a natural seeker. There's a big spiritual side to me. If someone asked me how would you identify yourself as a type of person, I'd say I'm a warrior, I'm a healer, I'm a teacher. Those are probably three words which describe who I am. So, and I'm learning Ayurveda, which is the 6,000-year-old ancient Indian tradition of healing. So there you go. That covers
Also
all my
a
warrior healing
mad
people.
Star Wars fan.
Oh, I'm a crazy Star Wars fan. I love Star Wars. Yeah, totally. I'm as geek as they come. I've got my geek chic on. I totally geek out on Star Wars and most sci-fi and fantasy, and I can talk quantum physics and I can do all of that. But look, at the heart of hearts, I guess, I love writing, and that's what I built my career on. So that's a little bit about me. That's who I am. That's what I do when I'm not a superhero.
So how did this other side of the story start? I think maybe start with, how did you and your ex-wife met.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I think what's also important is, how did it brought you? Because you guys used to live in Melbourne, right?
We've lived all over the place, actually. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'll go through that with you. Yeah. So my ex-wife and I, we were actually introduced to each other. So we were like, think of it like a setup. My auntie and her mum decided it would be a good idea to set us up.
You
So
mean a blind date?
it's kind of like a blind date. It's kind of like a blind date, but at the time she was living in Africa. So when I went to go meet her in Africa, we kind of kicked off, and her parents being fairly traditional and mine being fairly traditional and conservative. Um, the expectation was that you don't date too often. You just kind of meet each other a couple of times, and if you like it, that's it, seal the deal. And so that's kind of what we did. And part of it is because I was trying to. Part of it probably came down to a bit of an identity crisis that here I'm living in a Western world and still trying to preserve traditional Indian values, but that's kind of what it was, and that's when my parents did, and they've got this wonderful marriage. So I'm like, well, it can't be that bad. So I thought I'd give it a go too. So that's how we met. That was back in 2003. Um, Here we met in 2003, got married in 2004. Um, we moved around a little bit. So, we lived in Sydney. I was working a job in government and policy. But because of the long hours and everything, my wife was pretty insistent that, we kind of get something which is a little bit more stable. So where I wasn't spending 14 hours a day, trying to save the world in government and policy. But so I ended up moving into the sales and marketing industry, and that's my first foray into business, I suppose you could say. So I was working in recruitment at the time. I was a salesperson in the recruitment industry. In about 6 months, they offered me a promotion to go to Canberra, which thought was a good promotion. So, well, we went to Canberra, which, as they said, it was a promotion. You can see me doing air quotes right now. Those people who know Canberra think, yeah, it's either nice or it's not. And look, it's a lovely place. Grew myself, got to learn a lot. But when the time came to return back to Sydney, we ended up returning back to Sydney. And that was around 2007. And that's when I jumped into business as a full-time person. So I was actually looking at starting a coaching and training style business. And that's basically what it was. So about a couple of years later, we had my daughter Sanvi. So she was born in 2009. And it was an interesting time because, it was just me trying to carry a family on a single income, on a business which was still trying to find its legs in the middle of a global financial crisis. So that was quite interesting. And that's when I got into copywriting. But yeah, that's the story of how we became a family, really.
And so when it all happened, were there any signs now looking back in hindsight? Or did you think it literally just came out of nowhere, just like all of us friends that kind of felt at the time as well?
I did a pretty good job of kind of keeping everything kind of under wraps. But I would say, look, the signs, it depends on what you call signs. When, it depends what you call signs. Like when we met, my grandmother passed away. 10 days before we got married, my grandfather passed away. When she was here, our pet bird passed away. After we got married, our second pet bird passed away. Everything's dying already. You think that would have been a sign enough? Got this one
A
on our
spiritual
honeymoon.
sign.
It was a
But what
spiritual
about
sign. On our honeymoon, we were both sick, so
Oh,
we had to cut it short. But yeah,
let's just talk about what happened. Like, what was that
yeah.
moment that
Look,
kind of like everything turned into SHIT?
it's like, oh, what's going on here? Look, it was probably about the second year into marriage where things weren't stabilizing. Look, she'd migrated country. I totally get it. Second year in, she wasn't able to really hold down a job. She was struggling. At which point I thought, okay, maybe these are just like kind of teething issues, just settling in issues. We moved to Canberra. She got laid off from 3 jobs because she just wasn't performing. And at that time, it was just like, oh, things are getting worse. Do you know what I mean? And it was more the fact that every time she got laid off, it was never her fault. And then she kept getting very aggressive and she would get fairly abusive, verbally and things like that. And that's when it was just like, wow, this is not how I thought marriage would be. But me being, look, I'm loyal to a fault. Let's put it that way. So I'm like, okay, we can fix this. Let's try and get this right. And we tried a number of different things. Moving back to Sydney, we ended up having a child. We thought that might make things better. But it really exacerbated after Samvi was born, and she fell into postnatal depression, and that she got worse. It got much, much worse, and it got much worse to the point where we ended up having to move city again so we could put 1,000 kilometers between my family and us. So because she was blaming my family, I'm like, well, I don't want any conflict. So even when we got to Brisbane, it didn't stop. It actually got even worse and just kept getting worse and worse and worse. So what was it that got worse? The abusive nature, you know, um, the arguments over petty nothingness, the drama. Like it was just full of drama. Like it's like something out of a Bollywood movie. Do you know that type of drama? And I'm not talking about the singing and the costume changes. I'm talking about like the real sinister
Damn.
Bollywood. Yeah, I know. Imagine if it was singing in the rain and
I was like, that
changing
would be so
costumes.
much fun. I would love to come over and see the singing and
Right?
the dancing.
Yeah, I wish it was like that type of drama. No, it wasn't that type. It wasn't the good side of Bollywood. It was always the sinister villainy side of Bollywood. So it was quite dramatic. And I'm a guy. Look, very clearly, very openly. I don't do drama. So I don't cope well with drama. And I just don't like it. I'm a fairly simple, straightforward type of person. Um, we did live in Melbourne for a period. So after living in Brisbane, I got headhunted for work in Melbourne. And while the situation is good, while the money was flowing, she was happy. She still wasn't working. Samvi was in daycare full time from the age of 18 months, but she refused to work. She was just quite happy, just kind of, living it up. And so she did. And I thought, look, okay, maybe she just needs a bit of support. But the signs were just getting worse and worse and worse. Like every little thing, there was an argument. Every little thing, there was an attack. And then the gaslighting started. And that's when it got really bad when, certain things were said and she would completely deny them, or she'd say that I'm just imagining things, or she would say things that I told her, which I'd never even said, or she'd say things that other people had told her, which never actually took place. And so all these things would happen, and that level of gaslighting was just really, really terrible. And I was like, no, that can't work. I can't make that happen. Do you know?
So what's happened in your head during this whole thing? Because I think
Yeah.
obviously that's back in. I'm just trying to do my maths in my head. It's like more than 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of advertising in social media or in media about, I guess, abuse in such. Or right now, there's probably a lot of, I guess, reports and news and everything about, the different kind of abuse that or assault that us as female can experience, but there's still not a lot talking about how guys can also receive, abuse. So
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
in a way, what I'm trying to say is we're probably not the most educated back then, and even these days, about what those situations are or how do you define those situations. So what was happening in your head while you were experiencing through that? Did you realize that you were being, I guess, in an abusive relationship, or
Yeah, I kind of got doubts that that's what was happening, and I tried to do some research as to what I could do about it. And the truth of the matter was, look, I got counseling for myself, and the counselor would tell me, well, you need to bring your wife into this because this is not a one-way street. My wife refused to go to counseling at the time. She said there's nothing wrong with me. Counseling's for people who've got something wrong. And, she got the backing of her parents who are very traditional and said, look, no counselor, no psychologist, nothing. Like, she's not crazy. I'm not saying it's not about she's not crazy, but we've got problems we need to work out. When it did eventuate to the point where her anger issues were getting beyond control, and I kind of threw down an ultimatum saying she's got to get this fixed. And I think what ended up happening, she had a medical issue, which came up, and that kind of was a bit of a turning point where she kind of like light bulb went off. Something's not right. She agreed to go to counseling, but even that, she actually stopped going to counseling in the middle of the sessions, and she would be dropped off, but she never actually went to the counseling sessions. Where she went, I don't know, but I found out that she didn't actually go there. So, At that time when they were talking about abuse, the type of abuse, most people thought it was physical, but then, I learned that there was emotional abuse, there was financial abuse. Like, for example, I'd be bringing in all the money, but she'd be the one trying to control it, and she'd stop me trying to talk to my family, which I didn't realize was a form of abuse.
Mm.
Um, she would threaten me in terms of spirituality and stuff like that, and saying that, what I believed was completely wrong, and this is what's really going to happen, and this is the whole thing. And I was like, wow, okay, this is pretty full on and intense. And then she would do things like turn our daughter against me, and scare our daughter, saying, if you go to dad, he's going to hurt you, things like that. And so what ended up happening was the relationship between my daughter became distant, strained. On one hand, she'd tell my daughter that, your dad's going to hurt you. On the other hand, she'd come and say, your daughter doesn't trust you. She's scared of you.
Mm.
So this made it so naturally what I would do is
Trying,
I'd try and back
trying to
off.
play the two of you against each other.
Yeah, and that's what would happen with everyone. She'd play someone off against someone, and I think she thrived off that drama. She thrived off that drama. Um, and there was multiple attempts to try and reconcile this. There's multiple attempts when I said, "Look, this is not working." And I probably knew about 50 year in that this wasn't working, but I held on. I held on because I said I'm just loyal to a fault, and I was committed to the family. I was committed to us, and I really wanted this to work. And I think part of it was just idealism. I was just a really idealistic guy. I just wanted it to work. I'm one of these people that believes, like, I do believe in love. I do believe in romance. I do believe in marriage. Right? It's one of those things. And
Plus, you've
so
got a daughter together, right?
then we got a daughter together, right? So
Yeah.
something good you think would come out of it, right? Um, so the real signs happen around that way. It was quite distressing.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. Very distressing. I think it got worse when she started getting physically abusive. That's when things got really bad, like really bad. So physically abusive towards me, but also towards our daughter. And that was when I found out she's getting physically abusive towards our daughter. I went to get legal advice, and I went to 3 different counselors and a doctor and my lawyer, who all said, you have to separate. We wouldn't normally be this prescriptive, but your daughter's needing help. She's come to you for help, saying, Daddy, can you help me? Can we move out? Like, she'd say things like this. And I couldn't, like, kind of bring myself to separate the family, because, like, I'd rather my daughter was with me where she's safe, rather than spending half the time with her mum where I don't know what's going on to her. And that was the thinking that went on. Yeah. And so I kept it going for a little while longer. But it got to the point where when money went missing, when family heirlooms went missing, when jewelry went missing, when things like that went missing, and I confronted her about it, I said, look, this level of dishonesty is not working. I know you've done it. So we got a choice here. Either we try and reconcile and fix this up once and for all, or we separate. Yeah. And it was a tough conversation to have. It wasn't easy at all.
When did you guys have this conversation?
How so
many
we had
years?
yeah. So in May 2017, we separated under the same roof. So we lived in the same house, but we were living in separate rooms. But formally, I asked her to leave in the end, just 10 days after my 40th birthday. Put it that way. I remember very clearly.
Now you're showing your age.
Now I'm showing my age. Yeah. So that was in 2017. Now you can guess my age. Just after I turned 40, that was the conversation. I had to front her up about it, because it got to the point where I couldn't leave my daughter alone with her because she was scared.
Mm.
And that was just not healthy.
And
So,
was this when did Samvi come to you and say, "Hey, Daddy, I'm scared to be alone with"?
yeah, it happened probably for a few months beforehand, and I was still trying to figure out what to do about it. And that's when I went to all the counselors. That's when I went and took legal advice, and they were all, look, it's amazingly supportive. And a lot of them explained to me that, you've been under a lot. In fact, my doctor was in tears when I explained to him what the story was. He goes, oh my gosh, you've gone through so much. How is it that you managed to put up with it for so long? You need to do the right thing for you and Sanvi and let her go away. And that was the conversation we had. So, yeah.
How did you feel as a dad, right? I mean, now becoming a mum, I think us experiencing pain, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental, is so different to witnessing our kids going through the pain. So how did you feel, and what was the, I guess, process that you had to go through as a dad, watching your daughter coming to you and say, "Hey, I'm really scared."
I felt helpless in many ways because, on one hand, the family that I'd worked so hard to keep together was falling apart.
Mm,
Yeah. On the other hand, I knew what the right thing to do was. I just couldn't bring myself to do it because it was difficult.
mm,
Um, but the father in me wanted to protect my daughter. And so I was very conflicted, very conflicted. It was a very difficult choice for me because think about it, we were married for 14 years, right? When we finally got divorced. It wasn't that I didn't love this lady. I loved her deeply. I loved her a lot. And you think, but how do you love someone who's abusing you that much? Because look, it wasn't all bad. There were some good times as well, but the got to the point where the bad times outweighed the good. But you'd invested so much into this relationship
mm,
that maybe and I guess in hindsight and in wisdom looking at it, maybe it was the idea of the relationship that I was in love with as opposed to the person.
mm.
Uh, it was very difficult. I felt very conflicted, very, very helpless, um, and culturally bound, right? Divorce is
Yeah,
not seen as a good thing in my culture, right? So I felt I had a lot of cultural obligations there too, and that was a little bit more difficult. Yeah, because there's like I'm not just separating my family. I've got my
yeah,
parents who are being affected by this. I've got
yeah,
their social standing that's being affected. I've got the fact that my daughter's now in this. My mum always told me about you don't have your daughter in a broken family. So I felt very, what am I doing to my daughter? You know.
yeah. I think
Mm,
at the same time, right? And I think this is slightly different between mums and dads. Dads generally, feel obligated to, I guess, support's probably not the right word, but you're
mm.
the head of the house. You're meant to keep it together. Whereas
Correct.
for us
Yeah.
as mums, our support is more keeping the house in order, keeping and
Yeah.
in a way, I think whether you're the cause of it or not, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's still certain degrees of guilt because you had to bring this conversation to the forefront and go, "Hey, we need to separate.
Mm.
We need to do something about it." Did you ever feel any sense of perhaps guilt that,
Lots of it. Yeah.
yeah,
That I'd failed as a man. That I failed as a father. That I
or
failed my
as a son?
Oh, yeah, I felt as a son for sure, I felt like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very, very difficult, and, yeah, there was a lot of guilt, there was a lot of conflict within me. I was very hurt. I mean, even the day that, my ex-wife left our house, I couldn't stop crying. I was really
Mm,
hurt by it.
yeah.
I mean, I said, here's a lady that I spent so much time with, I invested so much into trying to keep a relationship together, and I failed,
Mm,
right? And that feeling of guilt was there, the feeling of shame was there, the feeling of failure was there, that me as a man, I couldn't hold it all together,
mm,
questioned me and my confidence, and that's a lot, right?
yeah.
That's a lot to deal with. Yeah.
So
Mm.
how do you finally bring it, like, having the courage to tell your and I do wanna use the word courage, right? Because 'Cause I've been through it. Like, telling our parent that you have failed in your marriage is, like, the hardest thing ever,
Yeah, totally.
right? Telling
Yeah.
your friends is easier. Telling your parents is, like, the ultimate. So how did you finally find the courage to tell your parents what had happened?
I think my parents saw a lot of it because it got to the point where my ex-wife didn't care who saw the conflict. I think she thrived as on the drama and the attention.
I really have to say, I think she actually cares because 'cause I've met her,
Yeah.
right, as a
Yeah.
as completely strangers, and I remember her being very friendly and very
She
kind,
is. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think in some way she does care, but it just depends on the audience.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when you met her, that was very interesting. I remember when you met her, that was at an event we had. Literally on the way back home, the fights were amazing. Yeah.
It's like, "I
And this is
gave you face in this public event, now."
now, that's it. Yeah, and this is according to psychologists that I'd spoken to. Now, this is undiagnosed, so but they said this is very typical of narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder. both of those, one face to the world, another face to someone else, right? And so this is where we thought there were a lot of mental health issues, and she refused to even acknowledge that there was a
Mm,
problem. The problem was always somebody else again. So it is look, I would say without a doubt, in front of everyone else, she is the most sweetest, caring, lovingest person. But as soon as the doors are closed, it was hell breaks loose, right?
mm,
Um, and that's what people had a hard time reconciling when I told them that we'd separated.
mm,
My friends, my family, everyone was like, "But why? But
mm.
why?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "How do I explain it?" Because I'm the one who kinda had to bear the brunt of it, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
You guys
and
didn't see
especially
what
when we
happened behind.
haven't seen the full picture, and that's why
Yeah.
I started this whole conversation about seeing a different
Mm.
side, right? When you haven't
Yeah.
seen the whole picture, it's almost like, Nikhil, are you telling the truth, right? Or are you
Yeah.
just making things up?
A lot of people thought that.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of
How did
people.
you actually bring it to your parents?
So my parents had actually witnessed a lot of situations, and they try to stop. They try to intervene as
Mm.
well. And I think a lot of my parents actually saw my son be being abused as well, which was very, very
Wow.
hard for them as grandparents. So
Yeah.
they saw that something was not right, and I had to have conversation with them in the lead up to saying, "I don't think this is going to work." And my mom
Mm.
was, "You have to make it work. You don't have a choice. You've got a daughter. All right, she's got to you to keep your daughter's name. Don't forget she's going to get married into the community." I'm like, "I hope fucking not," was what I said. Um, I don't know if that needs to be bleeped out, but yeah, that was literally like my reaction. It's like, "Oh, if this is a kind of obligation we're gonna tie my daughter to, no way, absolutely. I don't want
Mm.
her to go through what I've gone through." You know what I mean? Absolutely no way. Um, my dad was a lot more empathetic. I think my mum understood the situation, she just didn't want to accept the situation. My
Mm.
dad understood the situation, and having come from a slightly more liberal family where we had divorces in the family, he kind of thought, "Look, I don't like it, but I can see that, and I don't want you to suffer," type of situation,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So that was basically what it was. So when I did tell them that, "Look, I don't think this is gonna work," and when all the family heirlooms and everything went missing, they were, like, fully understanding that, "Okay, this is worse than what we thought." I'm like, "Yeah."
Mm. Yeah.
And so they accepted it. They didn't like it, but they accepted it.
Yeah.
Mm. And I think it was that incremental having to just kinda share with them because my parents had no idea something was wrong. I kept it all to myself. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Didn't share it with anyone, and that's just I guess I don't know. Is that a guy thing? Is that just a me thing? I don't know, but I refuse to get anyone else involved. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think it's not, right? Like, even when with my own failed marriage, my parents had no clue,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
they literally had no clue. The only clue that my mum had received was when she realized I was traveling alone, but that was
yeah.
already, like, months past the event, right?
Right, right.
So I think it might be a culture thing, it might be, you know, a human thing. Whatever it is, I think in some ways we all go through a similar process. Like, like I
Yeah,
said, as kids, we never really intended to let our parents down. And
yeah.
that's why telling our parents is like the hardest thing ever, right?
Correct. Yeah, correct. Absolutely correct. It was difficult, and I think
Yeah.
even the conversation leading up to the fact that we're having problems, mum, we're having problems, dad, that was difficult
Yeah.
because they had no idea. They thought
Mm.
everything was okay, you know? Yeah. So part of it was all the whole playing off one against the other. That was something my parents couldn't understand because they
Mm.
also got it and they all thought, "Nikhil's doing something wrong. Why is this happening?" You know? Because that's what was happening on that side. On one
Yeah.
side over here, it's like my parents are doing something wrong. So I'm like, "Why would my parents do this?" You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, all of a sudden, everyone's doing everything wrong. How does this happen? Right? So, yeah, something like
It's just
that.
a very wrong world.
It's a very wrong world. Yeah. So that was all those signs, all those signs. They were little things that kept adding up.
Mm.
Little kept adding up. And then there were big things that just kept happening. But, as I said, when it got physically abusive, that's when I think it was evident that this couldn't last any longer. It's just
Yeah.
about, okay, well, what's the next best step to take?
Mm.
Mm,
Yeah. And I think a lot of times it's I do believe whether you're male or female in those situations,
mm,
it's really about what's the best step to take, right? And I do believe as human beings, we're all generally good and we want to do the right thing. And
Mm.
I think that's also part of the reason why it's so hard sometimes to leave a relationship. It's
Yeah,
like you said, you think you might be able to work it out. And if you can, that's always the preferred option so nobody gets hurt.
I agree. And I think you know what the worst thing is, Lala? You and I have invested a lot into our personal development. So we get what it is to take responsibility. We get what it is to be committed because we've invested a lot into that growth and we know that this is what it takes to be a human being. So we've got this self-awareness about what it's going to take.
But
Not
sometimes it
everyone
almost backfires, right? I
exactly.
think.
That's what I was going to say. Because
Yeah.
of that self-awareness, we sometimes hold on longer than what we should.
Yeah. You're
Yeah.
like, no,
And that
hold on. There might be something wrong with me because I need
yeah,
to do more growth and more
I need to
development.
work on myself. Yeah.
Yep. But I think
Right.
sometimes that also just brings up a point that it's why we need to have a community. It's why we need to have networks, why we have to have
Mm,
support groups
I
and
agree.
mentors and coaches, because these people can actually see things from a different perspective. And hopefully they're close enough to us to understand our personal situation to go, hey,
Mm,
perhaps something was wrong. But I really
yeah,
wish, when I was going through my toughest times, that I knew the importance of having mentors and support groups around me.
exactly. Well, I didn't even know any of this existed. Do you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean?
No,
Because no one goes into a marriage expecting to get divorced. So we don't prepare for this stuff. It's just not
exactly.
what we're taught. It's like, it's wedding bells and happily ever after.
Pretty much.
That's what we're
Pretty
taught.
much.
Especially when it comes
Bloody
from
fairy
Christian
tale
background.
stories.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. I'm dropping that F-bomb again.
That's fine. That's fine. We can be womanly and still have F bombs.
Sure. Let's do that then.
So let's talk about the big theatrical volcanic moment in this whole thing, which was really, I think, to me, what was the most memorable for me was receiving a text to you one day and go, Sanvi's missing.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So tell us what happened. Let's play. You may not want to go back to that day, but I think for the audience, it's important to
yeah.
walk through what happened and the subsequent event that kind of follows.
So in December 2017, my wife finally moved out of the home with the discussion saying, "You take care of your daughter. She's your daughter. I don't want anything to do with either of you."
So did you ask her to move out, or did she move? Did she voluntarily decided that she was going to move out?
No, I did eventually ask her to move out because she was getting, knowing that she was on limited time, she was getting even more aggressive, and just making everyone's life a living hell. Yeah. And I was
If
like,
I
look,
suffer, you will suffer with me.
I think that's what it was. I think she's just, I personally think it was taking advantage of a situation of someone's generosity. Like, as I said, I still look at the fact that we were married for that many years, right? Since 2003 to 2019, right? Sorry, 2004 to 2019, we were married, right? So it's a long period. So obviously, I'm just not going to say it's over, bugger off, see you later. Hey, look, I want to make this as easy as possible. Like, there's no reason this needs to be hostile. And she agreed she doesn't want to be hostile. Right, I should have
What?
known better in hindsight. Yeah, right. I should have known better in hindsight. But she walked out, and she basically, I mean, she'd already taken all the things, and she's moving to her brother's, and she moved to Adelaide, and then she said very clearly, "I don't want anything to do with you. I don't want anything to do with your daughter. I'm just going to go and live my life now in freedom." It just happened to be on my coin, but that's fair enough. She withdrew all the money from the business that I'd set up, so that was pretty damn expensive. But fair enough. Look, okay, that's fine. That's fine. That happened. What happened is that for 6 months, she was out of the country, not even in Australia. Out of the country. There's family members of mine who are in the countries that she was in at the same time, watching her, going to dance parties and things like this, right? So she was obviously quite happy. Didn't want anything to do with us. She was living it up like she was sexy, single, ready to mingle, right? That type of thing, you know what I mean? So fair enough. Okay, that's what she wanted. I would try and get phone calls happening between her and our daughter. And it got to the point where my daughter was thinking, I don't want to do this anymore. This is so uncomfortable for me. My daughter said that. And I was just like, okay, well, our daughter, I should say. She's our
And
daughter,
how old was she back then?
8. 8. And I think what she didn't like was the fact that there was no predictability, because like kids like security, like certainty. So what we did was set up a call schedule, and she was like, no, I don't want a call schedule. Right? No, that's mum said that. Mum said, I don't want a call schedule. I want to call when I want to, not when you tell me to. And that kind of triggers something within her, right? So one day she returns to Australia, gives me a call and says, I'm back in Australia. I want to see Sambi. Sure, she's your daughter too, right? So literally, I kind of dropped everything and said, okay, look, we're going to go see your mom. And Sambi was a little bit excited, a little bit nervous at the same time. And at that meeting, she goes, that's it. I'm taking Sambi home with me. I said, it doesn't work like that. You haven't seen her for 6 months. She goes, I want 50-50 care. I said, look, I'm happy to do that, but let's ease into this. We've got to look at her well-being, right? Her psychologist has said we need to ease into something like this. She goes, I don't care what the psychologist said. I don't believe in psychology. That was almost predictable. Anyway, I slowly started easing off and giving her more time, and started having them go out and spending time alone. But my daughter always said, I want you nearby, Dad. I want you nearby. Right? And one day what ended up happening was she was at school, Samvi was at school, her daughter was at school. Her mum walks in, pulls her out of school, and says, I've got to take her to an appointment. When she doesn't return from the appointment, the teacher gives me a call and says her mother's taken away. At which point I was like, oh, where did she go? She goes, she said she had to go to an appointment. So I'm ringing her mum, where have you taken her? No answer. About 4 or 5 hours later, the school's panicking. We're panicking. We don't know where our daughter is. I'd driven all around the local area trying to find her. Thought she might have gone for a coffee or something. I didn't think for the life of me that she would be taken away and not returned. What surprised me was when we had to finally file a police report. The police said, yes, she's here. She's filing domestic violence charges against you. Right? And I'm like, what? I'm not the one who had domestic violence issues. I was the one who's abused, not the abuser. But apparently, because there's a domestic violence issue, the police couldn't give us locations or anything. So what ended up happening was our daughter was locked in a house, literally for 2.5 months. Right? She was locked in a house.
Literally locked in the house, not allowed to go out.
Not allowed to go out.
Not going to school.
Not going to school. I wasn't even allowed to talk to her. Right? It was about 2.5 months, we say. But what ended up happening was that I rang the lawyers up straight away and I said, look, my daughter's been taken away. And the lawyer said, I'm sorry, we're going to have to litigate this straight away. This is not something we can mediate. We will try, but she's probably not going to be responsive. And true to
And
what
are these
they
the
said.
same lawyers that you went to prior to get advice?
Yeah.
So they already had history, which is good.
They would have history, yeah. And they'd always suggest mediation and things like that. That's what they did. And they suggest, look, why don't you organize mediation? So we actually, on the day that Samvi was taken away, we actually had a mediation appointment. So you can imagine that. It's like everything's fine, but she'd been planning this. Is very clearly premeditated that she'd gone in to go and do this. So she filed domestic violence charges against me. The police rocked up to my house and wanted to investigate. And they said, look, you've had some pretty wild claims made against you. Tell us what happened. I said, look, over the years, the marriage just got distant. It just broke down. She decided to leave the country. And then one day she came in and said, I want to see her. And we tried to oblige. We tried to facilitate meetings. They got, do you have proof of this? And I showed them all the messages on WhatsApp and, social media and everything. So I had enough proof. And they said, can you send us a copy?
Was this because you kind of suspect that was happening, or you were lucky that you had all this proof?
No, because I always wanted an amicable separation. I always wanted somebody to have contact with her mum. And so there's messages of me saying, hey, can we line up a call? Are you free now? Can you talk now? So there's all of this showing that I was taking an effort, not because I suspected anything, but because I wanted to do the right thing for our daughter.
Yeah.
Right?
And it just happens, obviously, with phones these days. It saves the records, and you haven't delete them, right?
Yeah, correct. I don't delete any of my messages. So that's, I don't know, some people can call me a hoarder.
I think this
or
is also an important message, right? For men or women.
Yeah.
If you ever suspect anything, and obviously we're always trying to support that people are good in general, but if you ever suspect anything, the most important thing is to make sure you have evidence.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and it's not like you're going to look for things like when
No.
my wife hit me when she physically abused me. That was when I knew, okay, this is not going to work, and I actually did start taking notes of it because it was like I don't know what she's going to do next,
Mhm.
right? I was
Yeah.
literally fearful for what she was going to do next, so I didn't actually know. And that's, so we did keep evidence, and I did keep copious notes, but not because I was intending to litigate or anything like that, but it's because I just needed to know for my own safety and security that I
Yeah.
had some documentation there, right? And that was more for the protection of me and for Sanvi.
Yeah.
So after Sanvi was abducted, after the police came and investigated me, they said to me, "Look, we're not going to press any charges. She wants an AVO taken out against you, and she wants to press sexual assault charges against you. We don't see any reason to do that." And we don't see any reason for an AVO because she's not in any danger. So the police refused to press charges. And I said, "Is there any way I can speak to my daughter?" So I got 9 minutes that day, and that was all I saw. That was all I heard. And the last thing I heard was Sami screaming, "I still want to talk to Dad. Please let me talk to my dad." And that was it. Heard nothing. Right. So we ended up moving it straight to family court, and we asked for an urgency review. The court granted us an urgency review in 5 weeks, which usually they do it like within a day or two, but something must have happened and we only got it in 5 weeks. So for 5 weeks, I had no idea what was happening with Sambi. Honestly, I don't think, it was one of the toughest times of my life to not know what's happening to your daughter. And the only thing I could do was every day just write her a letter, and I kept a book that I wrote her a letter every day, just telling her how much I missed her, how much I loved her, and how much I thought of her, and what we were doing, and how much I was looking forward to seeing her again. So we ended up going to court 5 weeks later. But here's the thing, we hadn't heard anything from her mom. She hadn't even contested, right? So we'd served her with papers. The police had served her because they were required to serve her. So the police went and served her. We'd served her via email. We served her brothers. We served her family members. So there was no way she couldn't have got this message, right?
Mm.
What ended up happening was that the day before the court hearing, at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, her lawyer comes and delivers a response. That's the day before, and the response was, we'll put it this way, it was so graphic and vivid, I was shaking because I was like, you think you know someone after being married to them for 14 years and they slap allegations like this against you? I was like, wow, I couldn't believe that she would go this low. Right?
And it's graphically vividly incorrect, right?
Incorrect, yeah. Yeah. And so when I rocked up to court the next day, I was...
It's like Nikhil. Here's Nikhil that we see on the screen. And he has got either a split personality or an evil twin.
Yeah. Yeah. And the truth of it is neither of the two. Right? It was neither of the two. So when I rocked up that day or the next day to court, the barrister says, "Look, this is graphic. This isn't good, but I'm already picking faults in this. I'm already picking holes in this.
That's good.
And what we need to do is we need to now stack the evidence to show that you are, in fact, a healthy, mentally stable father. And we need to get enough evidence to show that she doesn't have the capacity to deal with this."
Mm.
So we did. And it took us about but the thing was, there was no judge on the day. So for some blessing or some fortuitous thing, if there was a judge on the day, they were launched and possibly launched a criminal investigation into me. What they did was we got orders to say, I get to see Sanvi once a week. They proposed once every 2 weeks. I said, no, I want once a week. And I had to pay for supervision, right? So I got to see her under supervision from a supervisor who would write a report on every interaction. So imagine I'm seeing my daughter, and the way I hug her, the way I talk to her, it's all being recorded, right? That's what it was.
And you're paying this person to record it.
And I had to pay for the privilege of $500 a visit and only 3 hours a week. That's all I got. Yeah, 3 hours a week. And that cost me $500. So it is a lot of money. Let's put it that way. It was a lot of money that I had to pay. But then also the cost.
That's only the beginning, though, right?
That was only the beginning. The litigation costs exceeded over 120 grand just the first time, right? Then there was the subpoenas and all the legal fees and everything. Like, it was just a crazy amount of money that I threw behind this. I had to liquidate everything. I had to take out loans. I had to borrow money from my parents. I've literally leveraged myself to the teeth, right? But by the end of that period, when we went into court, she withdrew. all of her allegations and settled. And I got 70% care. So she's still got to see the daughter, and that was fine. I was okay with that. But I got 70% care. And I thought everything was going to be over. But for 2 years, it got worse. And it got worse to the point that in 2020, our daughter ran away from her mom's place. Okay. And as a result, she's been staying with me ever since. But we had to go back to court because I was technically in breach of court orders. And so they went about another 100K, just like that, in court orders. And we had to go through everything through solicitors. We had to go through counseling. We had to go through all of that stuff. In May this year, May 16th this year, she finally agreed to let our daughter stay with us or stay with me 100% of the time. And she can visit her mom as and when she wants. And today I do offer her, would you like to speak to your mom? Would you like to see your mom? Her answer was no. She didn't feel safe. And she still doesn't. So yeah, that's what's been happening. So it's been 5 years.
And would you say it's over now? It's all settled? Life's back to normal? I guess there's no normal anymore, really.
It's I put it this way: the rebuilding process is something I've been waiting for a while, and now it's here. It's like I'm faced with a situation of wow, I've got a bit of work to do, but you know what? I've now got the space to do it. I've got the head space to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas before, all I could think about was just the court, the court, the court, the court, the court, and that honestly, like that burnt me out. Like I held strong until about August last year.
Yeah.
And it burnt me out. I did get into another relationship. Unfortunately, my level of burnout, my inability to be able to then focus on our relationship cost me that relationship. And that's, no regrets. I did the best I could, but I wasn't even able to take care of me at that point. That's how burnt out I was. And then in May, everything settled. So she agreed to give Sami 100% to me to live with, but she still wants say in major decisions long term. I get to pick the school, I get to pick where we live as long as it's within the Sydney metro region. But yeah, it's settled. So that's the good news. That's the good news. Do I feel it's over? My fingers are crossed. My fingers are crossed. I would like to think it's over. Like it's going to be very, very hard now to take this back into court given Sami's age. She's at an age where she can start making her own decisions, and no judge is going to tell her you've got to do this. No. Yeah. So I would like to think
I guess like none of us would ever think that we need to worry about, because if you ever met Sanvi, she's a very, I guess, confident young lady that knows exactly what she wants, and she will tell you what she thinks as well. There's no holding back, right? And I think that's one thing. Kudos to you, and I think you should be really proud as a dad.
I'm pretty proud of her. I know I've worked hard. As a dad, I've put a lot of effort, and I do focus on her quite a lot, and I think now that everything's settled, I've seen her confidence strengthen. I've seen her become a lot more assertive and sure of what it is she wants. And to be honest, like even when she ran away and she came and stayed with me, we could see like even her school reports were showing within 3 months, like the improvement was magnificent. Do you know what I mean? And that's just some of the beauty of it all. Like her report cards are now glowing. She's looking for leadership roles within the school. She's got her own voice on things. And it's just beautiful to see the way she's grown up. It really is. It's been, an absolute privilege to see the way that she's turned out. I'm very proud of her.
And I think it's a testament of two things, really. One is that, a lot of times as parents, we want to protect our kids, but I truly believe that our kids are more capable and stronger than we think they are. I mean, even as a mom watching George, like he's only 18 months old, but a lot of times I need to remind myself that he is a lot more resilient and he's, far more capable than what I think he is. And I think as parents, we need to give our kids credit, but also the space to allow them to be who they are and to flourish in that way. But the other thing, I guess, is also that, perhaps not us who are, I would say, more conscious parents, but we need to understand that whatever happens in our lives, kids pick up on it.
It's true. It's very true, yeah.
And plus, like how it affects you, it affects them too. And if anything, it probably affects them more because they don't understand it they can't quite process it. And I
Yeah.
do believe that a lot of times kids take it personally as if they are personally responsible for the things around them, especially when it involves their parents.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I know very much that Sanvi feels a lot of concern. And at the younger age, she knew that something wasn't right. Now that she's older and a lot more understanding, she's a lot more comforting. She's like, just wants to make sure that dad's okay. And she can see that I'll worry about her, right? It's what I do. That's my dadly job, right? She
Mm,
can see, but it's also, I want her to be okay. And she can pick up when I'm stressed. She can pick up when I'm okay. And I think the biggest thing is I think she's learning from it that, um, she doesn't want to go through this herself. Do you know? She doesn't want to live life this way. And I'm glad she shouldn't have to, do you
mm,
know? Yeah. She is very sensitive. She's a sensitive kid. I think she's an old soul.
yeah.
But as I said, like through all of this, she's done exceptionally well. And honestly, we've invested in therapy, we've invested in coaching for her. We've put a lot of the time, the effort, the energy into that,
Mm,
and it's paid off. It has.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said, it's not easy, right? You really do have to put in the support for her. And I think especially kids at the beginning, it's probably really hard for them to even express what those emotions are and how they're really feeling. And it is our job as a parent to sort of guide them through it because it's not easy. It's a big thing for any kid to witness that.
Yeah, it's literally their world collapsing around them. Everything they've known, their model of the world is, two people who love them. Do you know what I mean? Um, it's very difficult for them. Yeah, and even
Mm,
now, it's so funny. Even Sami says, she goes, "You know what? I just wish everything would be okay in the sense that you guys could get along." Unfortunately, the relationship between me and my ex is like, look, I don't engage with her, and she's still hostile towards me, so I just don't engage. And she says, look, even if you guys got along, that would be enough. If you guys just
mm,
were able to talk, it would make my life easier. But now I mean, this was up until about 3 years ago, right? Now she's just like, I just don't want anything to do with mum. You know what I mean?
mm.
Um,
Yeah, which is kind of sad, really.
it does make me sad because, I don't want her to not have a relationship with her mum, but by the same token, she's got one parent she trusts right now, and I'm
Yeah.
not gonna violate that either,
Mm,
you know? Right
yeah.
now, she does confide in me, she talks to me, and I wanna keep that strength of the relationship. She should have at least one parent that she can talk to.
Yeah.
I don't want her to feel like she doesn't
And
have
she's
any.
got two amazing grandparents and, aunties and support network around her as well. So I think she's
Yeah,
very fortunate in that way.
yeah.
Have you ever spoken to Samvi about like what's her view about family, about marriage, about relationships now? Because she's almost approaching that age, right? I know that's quite a scary thing for a dad, but she's in some people calls it preteen, some people already calls it teenage,
Yeah,
so she's
14, she's very
approaching that age.
Yeah, she's 14. She's very much a teenager. Yeah, just early today, she goes, "Oh, do you reckon Liam can come over for a sleepover?" I said, "Who? Liam? Doesn't hold on, no, no." She goes, "But he's got a girlfriend." I said, "I don't care. No, I'm no. I'm sorry. There's a line I've got to draw." And
Hey,
she
at least
goes,
you didn't say no. Who's Liam? I'm gonna lock you up. You're banned to go out forever.
"No, no, I didn't do that." And I'm like, "No, I know Liam. He's a good kid, but I've got to draw a line." Yeah, I'm very open and liberal as a parent, but at the end of the day, I'm still also very protective as well. And
Mm,
Um, kids are at an age where things happen, and I'm too young to be a granddad. Let's put it that way. Um, no, well, look, I just want her to be safe. I guess that's what it comes down to. Granddad or not, I want her to be safe.
mm,
I have that responsibility, and I have to, look at what is what. And I just don't think it's a good idea right now.
mm,
She'll make her own decisions, and I'll respect them. I may not necessarily like them, but I'll be able to respect them because she's a grown adult. Right now, she's just a teenager who's thinks she can take on the world. And she does a pretty good job, I'll be honest. But there's a lot that she's not aware of, and there's still a lot
mm.
of insights about that. And I need to, kind of guide her through that. I need
Yeah.
to kind of not shelter her from it, but guide her through it. Yeah.
So back to the original question. Do you think Samvi
Oh yeah.
is
Sorry.
still open to relationships or
For herself or for me?
yeah. No, for herself?
Look, I think
I
she's
think for you, she will always want you to be happy, right?
yeah. She It's so funny. I'm gonna come back to your question in a sec, but I have to make
Yeah.
this point. It's just really funny when we decided with her mom. I said, look, we'll have to go and tell Simon together that we're separating. That didn't happen. Her mom went and said, "Hey, your dad and I are separating. He's going to take care of you, and I'm going to leave." That was literally what she said. And
I
Sanvi
can
was like,
imagine if I am Sanvi and my mom just came in and said this to me, I'd be like, "What
literally,
did you just said?"
she ran out to me and she said, "Mom said that you guys are separating." I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "No." Then she looks at me. She goes, "Does that mean you're going to get a Spanish wife?"
And she will have to talk about this joke, right? So before we came on, Nikhil and I had a chat. And he's like, "Oh, your hair's red." And then for some reason, he's like, "Oh, Lala, you know what? You actually tick 2 out of the 3 boxes of my ideal woman. So what are those 3 boxes, Nikhil?"
Oh, I said redhead, Latina, and Asian. And there's a reason I said that. I said I reckon that's a great mix, but you'll never find one.
Yep. So I then obviously most people would know that I tick 2 of those boxes right now because you can see my hair's red. I'm Asian, but what a lot of people don't know is I'm actually 1/16 Portuguese.
Yeah. So there you go. Lala 643 out
So
of my 3
Nikhil had a little moral dilemma. Obviously, we're all friends
I
here.
had a massive moral dilemma. I love Lala. I love Scott, and I can't kill Scott, and I can't take Lala.
And I
I'm
cannot
having a
see
bit of
George without his birthday. So
yeah, and we
even though
just make a
you
very
are
awkward, like a
his
very awkward
daughter.
conversation with a very awkward conversation with George. I'm your father and your godfather. That'd just be too weird. There's a Star Wars reference, right?
And then George will be
Um,
like, "But the skin color is very different."
but you're black
I'm white.
and white. So it's really funny because the year before we separated, we actually went to Europe. And it's an attempt for me to try and repair our relationship. I knew travel was a big thing for us, so we kind of we had a trip to Europe. We spent 3 months in Europe, and one of the places I absolutely loved was Italy. I speak Italian fluently, so Italy for me was like going home, right? And then when we went to Spain, I absolutely fell in love with the culture. I thought the people were amazing, and I made a mention of that. Oh my God, check out that flamenco dancer. How gorgeous is she? How elegant is she? Not a good thing to do when you got a narcissistic ex-wife, right? So she just
Who
kept
is
saying,
physically abusive.
who's physically abusive, yeah. And so she turned around and said, "Well, if you like the Spanish woman so much, why don't you marry her?" So she kept goading me every now and again. Every time she got pissed off, go find yourself a Spanish wife. Go find yourself a Spanish wife. And she'd do it in front of my parents. She'd do it in front of Savi. So when we separated, when you had that separation, Savi's reaction was, "No, hey, does that mean you're
But
getting a Spanish wife?" So I was like, "Savi, we'll talk about this later." That's not the appropriate reaction. That was so funny.
don't rub it in front of your mom.
But the look on her mom's face was priceless. It was hilarious. She goes, "You're supposed to be sad." It was literally what
Oh
she said.
damn, my plan didn't work.
Damn it, But yeah. So look, to kind of go back to it, just Sami was skeptical of getting into relationships before. She was very, very skeptical about it. Now she's like, I know she had a bit of a high school crush. And at which point I was like, okay, I'm going to go get my shotgun license. And 2 weeks later, they kind of like had their little breakup, the crush breakup. Yeah, she had a couple of those crushes, and one of them didn't go through. So that was a bit of unrequited love. And another one was, he was kind of caught between her and another girl that was living somewhere up in the Gold Coast. So yeah, that was again. So unceremoniously she was kind of dumped, and that wasn't very nice for her. So she felt a little bit of heartbreak. But I think that's actually not a bad thing because it starts showing her how to draw boundaries, starts telling her what's important, right? And I think this is really important, which is something unfortunately I didn't get having very strong cultural parents. It was like no girls, no girls. So I had no girls. But yeah, so I think for some it's good. So she's been exploring as most teenage kids do, and at the moment she's kind of like, don't know. I think she's got the hots for some Hollywood actor at the moment. So that's probably the closest, I
Yes, we
guess.
do.
So that's as we all do. But yeah, look, I think she's open to it. She's not concentrating it. I think she wants it for me though. She really wants it for me. She keeps saying to me, "Dad, you promised you'd get me a nice mom. I'm still waiting." Oh my God, pressure. Yeah. Yeah.
No
So
pressure, Dad. No pressure.
No pressure, no pressure. And she's just like she's really funny. She told me the other day. She goes, "It's really funny. I was talking to my friend at school, and we were talking about setting you up with her mum." I'm like, "But her mum's got a boyfriend." He goes, "But we don't like her boyfriend." I'm like, "But that's not for you to make a call on." That's it's too funny. We don't
It's
like her
not
boyfriend.
even your mum,
It's not
Sammy.
even your mom. Yeah, but it's her best friend's mom, and she, well, not best friend, one of her good friends' mom. So, yeah, the two of them were talking about how cool it'd be if we were sisters. Let's set our mom and dad up, and like, yeah, but
That is
she's got a
very
boyfriend.
sweet, though.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, she does want me to be happy, and she does think it's she does want me to get into a nice, stable relationship with a loving person. And that's very generous. And she's at an age where she's not going to feel threatened by that.
Mm,
She's at an age where she can hold her own. I mean, God, she's going to be a Taekwondo black belt next year. Like that's
I
pretty
know.
good, right?
Yeah, you wouldn't want to
Um,
mess with her.
don't want to mess with. Oh, I saw her sparring yesterday. Oh my God, I was impressed. I'm like, that's my girl. Man, she was kicking everyone's
But
backsides.
even if you mess with her, hey, her dad's also a Taekwondo instructor.
Yeah, I'm also a Taekwondo instructor. You mess with her,
And watch out for grandpa as well.
yeah. Grandpa's also been doing Taekwondo as well. So yeah, we're
Yep.
a Taekwondo family. He doesn't do it anymore. He's focusing on yoga, but he'll still kick someone's butt. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So look, I think she's open to it. I don't think she's open, but not rushing into it. Which she's a
Mhm.
smart. She's not. She can hold her own, as I said, and
Yeah.
her decisions are well thought out. Like she doesn't make decisions lightly. She does think them through. And she's not left wanting for. So if she just wants something, she comes and talks to me about it, and we'll have a discussion. If it's appropriate, we'll say, yeah, go ahead. And if she's not, we explain why, and then
Yeah.
she'll come back next time with something else. So
I love that.
yeah, it's a good relationship. She knows her boundaries. We've got a friend type relationship, but she's
Mhm.
also understands the parenting boundaries too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's just close this whole loop. And I think, I do have two questions
Yeah.
to close in closing. I guess the first one is, as a guy, let's go the other way first. What would your advice be for other dads that are going through, I guess, perhaps similar situation? Or if any guys that kind of sense there's a hint of that relationship going down a similar path.
If you're a dad, then I would say look at your kid's best interests, right? Don't play games. Be honest, be upfront. Look at your kid's best interest and get agreement from your partner about that. And make it very, very clear that this is about the kid's best interest, right? And co-parent as best as you can. I wish I had a really positive co-parenting relationship with my ex. A child does need both a motherly figure and a fatherly figure. Yeah, I do believe that even now. Even though I think I'm a fantastic father, I still think she needs a motherly figure. And it just
And I really
hurts me.
truly don't believe that's something a grandma or even like an auntie would be able to replace.
No, no,
It's different. The
yeah,
relationship that a motherly figure or a mom has
yeah.
on, the child. I hate to say it, but as a mom, I truly believe it's irreplaceable.
Yeah. And look, there's the situation here is look, with me is a little bit different where you've got an abusive mom.
Mm,
But at the end of the day, she needs a positive role model that can be a mother to
yeah.
her, not a grandmother, not an auntie, not a mate, but someone who can be a mother to her,
Yes.
right? And right now we don't have that, right? So all you single ladies, anyway, had to say that. But look, for a father, look, do the right thing for your kids, right? And don't be scared to ask for what you know is best in your child's interest. Don't be selfish about it. Be generous about it, but don't be scared to ask for it, right? And don't be scared
Mm.
to fight for it if you have to, right? But hopefully it doesn't get to that, right? Try
I
and
think
solve things outside of the courts.
I think one thing that you've done really well is just seek advice, right? Be
Yeah,
open-minded about it and seek advice. And I think that's probably the best thing that anyone can do, right?
mm,
Not just seek, I guess, professional advice, but sometimes if it does feel like it's heading towards the legal route, also don't be afraid to seek legal advice.
Yeah.
But at the
Super
same
important.
time, don't be afraid to tell your family and close people who are close to you and seek advice that way.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. It's super important. You've got
Mm.
to get that advice. Don't give up on your support network. There's a stat that was going around that single fathers have the highest rate of suicide amongst men, right? 21 a week or something like that. The figures were astoundingly shocking, right? I know what it takes as a dad, right? I know how much you guys love your kids. Don't give up on them. They need you, right?
Mm.
They do
I
need you.
think
As much as it sounds like it doesn't, they do need you.
at the same time, right, it's like Scott and we've gone through this journey for the past 18 months, and I observed Scott as a dad. It's hard for dads being dads and looking after kids. There's just certain aspects of things that perhaps it's not in your DNA. Perhaps it's just not a guy's thing. You know, there are certain things when it comes to looking after your child
Yeah.
that it is a bit of a challenge.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Look, I'll be the first to say men and women are not made the same.
No,
Right? There are certain roles
it's
that a woman
challenging
will
enough
do.
for us, but I can
Yeah.
clearly tell, and from the conversations I had with a lot of my friends, men friends and women friends, it's just different.
It is very different. Yeah. Look, I can be so many things to somebody. I can never be a mum. Right? I can never, and I've told her that. Like, I can understand when you have your period. I'll never be able to. I can sympathize, but I'll never be able to understand because I don't have that experience. Right?
No,
So you can talk to me about what it's like to fall in love with a guy. I'll never have that experience, so I don't know. I mean, I'll never say never. Friday nights are an exception, but yeah, know what I mean. But you know what I mean. There's certain things like I don't know what it's like to have a high school crush on a boy. I never had one.
Mm.
I never will. You know, I've never been heartbroken as a girl before. I will never be able to understand that. Do you know what I mean? But there's just a number of things that, as a mother, I won't be able to provide as a father. Right? A mother can provide that, and we need to acknowledge that men and women are not made the same. It's not about equal. It's not about socially equal. It's biologically we're different. Do you know what I mean? We're biologically different. Socially, equality, all that stuff's fine. Biologically, we're not equal.
and we're
Right?
not wired the same.
We're not wired the same. We're not. Our hormones produce in different quantities. Our physiology and anatomy is completely different. Do you know what I mean? There's certain things that we as dads do, which is irreplaceable. Right? There's certain things that mums do is irreplaceable. We can't substitute. We can do our best, but it's a struggle. I can't breastfeed. I honestly can't.
You sure?
Yeah.
You sure? But this is, and I could be wrong. I think this is what I learned years ago from learning about healing parenting or parenthood wounds, right? Our dads represents our playfulness, represents the fun and the endearing side of us, but also what they are is they set the boundaries,
Boundaries. Yeah. The
teaches
whole
us
discipline.
how our relationship with authority. That's
Yeah.
what a father figure
Correct.
does,
That's what a father figure
right?
does. Yeah.
And with a mother figure, it is about the caring side of us, the community, the compassion,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But it is also about how we interact with the greater community.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
those are two very it's your typical yin and yang. It may
Yeah.
sound like duh, but this is also why is important that we cannot have one or the other,
One or the other. Yeah. Right.
right?
Like you think about it, like the roles of societally that we play. As a father, we're generally the providers, right? I
Yeah.
say generally the providers because that's our natural, typical wired role. You know, whether it's going out shopping or whether it's going out hunting, or whether it's going out for a job, whatever it may be, that typically is our role. Whether you call it sociologically, but it's kind of what we're wired to. We're the providers, right?
Yeah. But even if you're not, right, because that's just, I know a lot of our audience are female people. Like, whoa, hold on a second. I just want to again offer a different perspective because that's what happens in our household as well. Even if the dad is not the main provider, right?
I'm not talking about breadwinner, but for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if we just look at the physiology,
Yeah.
right? Dads generally have a deeper voice.
Yeah.
They generally taller and more well built, right?
Mm.
If you really think about it from a kid's perspective, a deeper voice generally has that authoritative
Or yeah,
feel.
yeah,
But
correct.
at the same time, when you're disciplining your kids, try and discipline someone with a high pitched voice compared to disciplining somebody
Listen
with
to
a
me now.
deeper voice,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
It's
Yeah,
just basic human psychologies in
basic
our
human. Yeah,
physiologies.
that's yeah, correct. Yeah, and as I said, like it's just look. I mean, if you're talking about energies, like the masculine energy is built to serve, right? That's why when I mean provider, that's what I'm talking about. Is we're built to
Mm,
serve, right? Whereas the feminine energy is built to nurture. Do you know what I mean?
and support, yeah.
For yeah, and that's what I meant. Not like as like breadwinner or stuff like that,
Mm,
but this is just kind of what it is.
yeah.
So a child does need a balance of both. It needs to know how to serve, but it also needs structure. It needs discipline. It needs focus, but it also needs vulnerability. It needs
Mm.
sensitivity. It needs nurture. Do you know what I mean? And that's where the dichotomy of a good binary parent relationship works.
We can really
Yeah,
talk about this all day, right?
I could.
I think I really want to close this by, again, having that balance. We've given advice for dads. And what would your advice for women or moms that's, I guess, perhaps considering separation? I think a lot of times, I hate to say
Yeah,
this, but us female beings, from based on my observation, are so much better at playing victim. Right? It's about I'm getting hurt, me, 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 me. But at the same time, I think there's a bigger picture at play here.
yeah, yeah. I think it's important to understand that a father's love is no less than a mother's, right? And if you can understand that your child does need a father as well, don't play victim, play co-parent, right? Your child will thank you for it. There will be no resentments.
Mm.
Um, that's what I would say. That
No,
understand that is no less than a mother's.
I think it's also important to understand that, in our kids' mind, there's never a competition in terms of their love for their parent.
Hmm.
I know sometimes when it comes to discipline, when it comes to kids going through those ages when they're being a bit more rebellious, but like in my mind, I was pretty rebellious in my early teens and I had a lot of conflict with my dad. But now
Hmm.
as an adult, I don't love my mum or my dad more than the other person.
Yeah,
Right?
correct.
I think it's important. A lot of times we look at the love that we receive from people as we have to compete. And I think that's the way that we've been programmed and conditioned, to think that love is something you compete for. Love is limited.
Hmm.
I think it's really important to understand that the love that you receive from your kids is never limited.
Yeah.
If the love that
Yeah.
you give them is unlimited.
Correct. Correct. That's. I love the way you just articulated that. It's so powerful. Hundred
Yeah.
percent.
Well, are there any closing comments then, Nikhil? Perhaps I haven't covered.
Closing comments. I'm just trying to think of words of wisdom. I have a lot I could talk about. There's a lot that I could say. Look, we've covered a lot. I think I've given you my story, but all I'd say was, look, it's tough going through separation. It's tough going through divorce. Understand that and don't make it any more difficult than what it needs to be for
Mm,
anyone. Yeah, we're all human beings, and if we can just acknowledge that and put our egos aside, I know it's easier said than done. There is a lot of hurt in play. Get the therapy, get the counseling, get your support network, build it up, and lean on them. You can get through this, right? It doesn't have to be messy like mine was.
mm.
That's
So
probably yeah.
where from here for Nikhil?
Look, I've after the courts ended in May, I've taken a few months just to kind of unwind and relax and refocus my life. I'm rebuilding myself spiritually. I'm taking new directions with the business in my growth consulting. Just getting myself to a good point where I can be back on my feet, back independent, and it would be nice, I suppose, somewhere down the track, if the right lady does come along, I'd be more than happy to to share my life with her as well. But I'm not rushing into it. I've got a daughter. You're gonna have to get past her first,
And vice versa.
and vice versa. Yeah. Look, I guess for me, it's about rebuilding, and just moving forward. It's always about moving forward. I'm just very lucky. I've got some wonderful friends. I've got great family, and just the most brilliant support network. And I know that in the next few months I'll be in a really, really good place. So I'm pretty good.
And maybe we can catch up with you in a couple of months and just see how you're going as well. But I'm glad that the story has got a happy ending.
Yeah.
And I can really see your growth and Samvi's growth and, your combined growth as a family throughout this whole process. And I've learned a lot through watching you guys as well. I really have to say, when I first met Scott in 2018, I was very naive in my version of the world.
Mm.
And it wasn't until, seeing people close to you going through those experiences, you go like, well, actually, there is a different side of story. There is a flip side of that coin. So the same thing that I said in the opening, I'm going to use it as my conclusion for today's episode. And obviously, first of all, Nikhil, thank you so much for your generosity, for your time, but also to be so open and vulnerable and talk about your story, because it's not easy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. I'm glad. I mean, and my story from a long way, and I hope it really helps people to see what is on the other side.
Yeah. And I really hope that, the message allows us to open our eyes, open our hearts, and have a different perspective. And really, it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It really is simply about understanding that when you hear someone's story, understand that perhaps there are other versions of the story or other sides of the story as well.
Mm.
And I think our world can really help. It will really help our world if, there's more of us with an open mind and an open heart, because that allows us to be more accepting of the people around us.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing to say.
Thank you. So Nikhil, thank you once again for your time, and thank you for everyone who's watching this live. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. So if you like this episode, please give us a like, share it, share the podcast with your network, and if you so desire, please subscribe to it as well. Love you all so much. Thank you once again, Nikhil. I'll see you
Thanks,
guys
Lala.
next time. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Womanly Way. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast if you feel aligned to do so. Or check out our post-show discussions on my Instagram page @The Womanly Way. See you next time.